Welcome back, you lovely degenerates, to another episode of Lord of the Mysteries, where things get more twisted than a drunken contortionist. If you're here for answers, expect more confusion, because the mysteries are deeper than my trust issues. But hey, that's what we signed up for, right? Now, before we dive into this madness, hit that subscribe button like you owe it child support. Don't be shy, just like the plot. We're only getting wilder from here. Chapter 101: Unexpected Clue, House Street Divination Club. Klein pressed down on his half-top hat and made his way toward the main door, strutting like he was about to audition for a detective noir film. But hey, a man's got to look the part, right? He wasn't in his usual stiff formal wear today. Nope, today he was rocking a white shirt and a light-colored vest, paired with a sleek black windbreaker. If anyone dared to say he wasn't looking sharp, they'd be lying to themselves. This outfit was more combat ready, and better yet, it only set him back a single pound, including a custom pocket sewn into the vest. Not bad, but still, he could feel his wallet crying in the background. As he stroked the revolver at his hip and double-checked the metal bottles stashed in his tiny inner pocket, Klein took out a portrait and sauntered into the divination club. No surprises here, Angelica, the club's drop-dead, gorgeous attendant, was at her usual post. "Good afternoon, Mr. Moretti. Didn't expect to see you back so soon," she greeted with a smile that was so radiant it probably melted half the room. Klein took off his hat and sighed dramatically, because what's a detective without some theatrics? "Good afternoon, Miss Angelica. Had a dream during my noon nap. A real trippy one, about Mr. Hanas Vincent and, well, his complications. As a fortune teller, you know I can't just ignore any dream, right? Might be a message from the gods or a result of bad takeout." He gave her a knowing look. Angelica, clearly confused by this mystical nonsense, nodded slowly. "What did you dream of?" "I saw Hanas Vincent having a heated argument with someone," Klein said, passing her the portrait like he was handing over classified intel. As she unfolded the drawing, Klein rubbed his temples, sneakily activating his spirit vision, hoping to catch a hint of her emotional state. This person. Angelica stared at the portrait, her eyes narrowing in thought, like she was trying to solve a riddle, or maybe just remember where she'd left her keys. Klein watched as her aura turned a thinking blue. Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary there. "This person," Angelica muttered again before looking up, her brow furrowing. "I've seen him before." Klein's mind shifted into overdrive. "When was that? I can't pin down the exact date. Maybe about a month ago? I remember him showing up with Mr. Vincent, escorting him to the door while they whispered about something. What stuck with me was his crazy eyebrows, thick and messy, like they were in a battle with gravity. And Mr. Vincent, smiling. Like, what's up with that? I've never seen him that happy." She nodded to herself as she recalled the details. Oh yeah, the guy had grayish blue eyes and not much hair left on his head. Klein, with his gentle "don't freak out" tone, asked, "Did you see him again after that?" Angelica shook her head. "Nope, just that one time. Honestly, if it wasn't you, I'd think the police were on my case. Like showing me a portrait like that, sheesh. But hey, you're a legit seer, so I'm not worried." "Heh, if only you knew. I am the popo," Klein thought, keeping his poker face intact. Instead, he sighed and said, "A real seer knows just how insignificant we all are. We catch only glimpses of the grand scheme, but the big picture? That's a puzzle we'll never fully solve. Keeps us humble, you know? We're just trying to survive, like cats chasing laser pointers." Angelica blinked at him in awe. "I never imagined a seer like you could be so respectful of fate. Honestly, it's impressive." "Respect? Lady, I'm just trying not to get roasted by something from the beyond." Klein gave her a smile and shifted his focus. His spirit vision was sharpening. He could even make out more details in Angelica's aura. It was like he had finally upgraded from pixelated glasses to HD vision. "Wait, is my seer potion starting to digest?" The thought hit him like a punch to the gut. Damn, it's about time. I've seen way too many wannabe psychics who act like they've got fate in a chokehold after learning one or two tricks. They don't even know how small we really are, Angelica said with a grin. Klein chuckled. "The more you know, the more you realize how clueless you are." As he reflected on his progress, it hit him. The acting method wasn't just about playing a role. It was about fully embracing it, living it, breathing it. You had to understand the hidden rules behind the facade, not just parade around like some magical diva. Only then could you sink your soul with the potion's essence and gradually digest it. If things kept going this smoothly, Klein reckoned he'd have this seer thing down pat in a few weeks. Maybe sooner, if the stars were feeling generous. With this in mind, Klein couldn't help but thank the sweeted clown for teaching him with his life. If it wasn't for him, he would probably spend months at the divination club, summarizing the rules of a seer through numerous attempts, for better or for worse, before he began acting strictly. Mr. Moretti, I sometimes even think of you as a philosopher, Angelica said with a sigh upon hearing Klein's reply. In my circle of friends, the term philosopher is used to scold somebody. Klein was in a good mood. With that said, he bowed, wore his hat, and left after bidding farewell. Although Angelica was unaware of the gentleman's name or identity, Klein was in no way depressed. What he learned was sufficient enough for him to engage in the next phase of his plan. 36 Zoutland Street, inside Blackthorn Security Company. Dunn looked at the portrait in his hands with his deep gray eyes. You wish to carry out a search for this person? Yes. Klein had long prepared a reason for this. Captain, didn't I mention that I would head to the Divination Club to observe the reactions of its members on Hannas Vincent's sudden death? I didn't discover anything yesterday, but I accidentally found out today that the person in the portrait had appeared with Hannas Vincent once and was secretly discussing something with him. I flipped through our team's investigation report just now, but I didn't discover any person resembling him in the report. There were no loopholes in his description. Even if Dunn Smith were to take this portrait to the Divination Club, he would get the same answer from Angelica. Dunn cast his gaze away from the portrait and laughed. From the looks of it, the compensation funds weren't a waste. Captain, isn't your memory bad? Why would you mention the compensation at this point in time? Klein maintained a smile and didn't say a word. Was this drawn by you? Dunn asked in passing. Yes, I drew it with the help of ritualistic magic, Klein replied, completely honest. Of course, speaking the truth and revealing the whole truth were two different matters. Dunn nodded slightly and said, Get old Neil to make a few more sets. I'll get Kenley and Royale to investigate and seek the cooperation of the police department. If this clue is of any use, you would have contributed greatly once again. May Goddess bless us. Klein tapped 4 spots on his chest as he appeared abnormally devout. For him, all he needed from Dunn and Company was to figure out the name and identity of the man in the portrait. He could divine his location above the gray fog. Despite it being his day off, Klein didn't immediately return home after leaving the Blackthorn Security Company. Instead, he took the public carriage to the harbor and arrived in front of the Evil Dragon Bar's entrance. In his considerations, although a seer lacked the means to directly engage in combat with an enemy or the means to cast spells quickly, combat could be classified in many ways. Not all battles were chance encounters. As long as he had sufficient time to prepare, a seer could similarly deal with an enemy using ritualistic magic. It was exactly how he resolved the magic mirror divination incident at Selena's house. And this also meant that it was best if a seer brought along the essential oils, herbs, and tiny candles to avoid being in a situation where they were unavailable when they were needed most, thus resulting in a helpless death. After all, not everyone was like Selena, who had an entire assortment of mysticism items which could be used. As for the ones he applied for, as Klein had practiced frequently, he had used up most of them. He kept what was left in his tiny inner pocket. He patted the cash note in his pocket and pushed open Evil Dragon Bar's door and strode in. It was noon, and there weren't many customers in the bar. Nor were there any rat baiting or boxing matches. It was quiet and not lively enough. Klein observed the guests drinking beer and playing cards as he walked toward the billiard room that led to the underground market. At that moment, he saw a muscular old man walk out with a torn admiral's jacket draped over his shoulders. Were you the friend old Neil brought last time? Reeking with the smell of alcohol, the blue-eyed, messy brown-haired elder sized up Klein and laughed. Klein guessed at his identity and took off his hat and bowed. Yes, how might I address you? Old Neil often mentions you. I'm the boss here, Swain. The blue-eyed elder's arms were thick and brawny. He had firm muscles and had the bearing of a military officer. Former Tinjin-mandated Punisher captain. Rumor has it that he was once part of the Royal Navy. Klein replied politely, "Yes. If you're in need of money, feel free to approach me." Swain laughed as he mentioned before walking towards the bar counter. At that moment, Klein's heart stirred as he immediately shouted, "Wait a moment, Mr. Swain. I have something I would like to ask of you." Swain halted in his steps, turned halfway around, and said with a chuckle, "You look, well, very similar." "No, I'm not having memory issues." The corner of Klein's lips twitched as he pointed at the portrait he drew and asked, "Have you met this gentleman before?" He suddenly realized that Selina had likely been brought by Hanas Vincent to the underground market. This resulted in Elizabeth's knowledge of the evil dragon bar as well. Then, could the man in the portrait who had some relationship with Hanas Vincent have come here before? Swain took a careful look and replied affirmatively. "I remember him. He had asked me if I had documents or items related to the main peak of the Hornasis mountain range." Documents and items related to the main peak of the Hornasis mountain range? Klein was taken aback as he suddenly connected that to another matter. Back when he was borrowing the journal issue related to the main peak of the Hornasis mountain range at Deweyville Library, the librarian had casually mentioned that someone had just returned it. Therefore, he still remembered very cleverly and didn't need to flip through his name cards to determine if the man existed. Could the gentleman who borrowed the journal issue before me be the one in the portrait? The gentleman that had witnessed the exchange of the Antigonus family's notebook. Chapter 102, Cloth Merchant. The more Klein thought about it, the more things started clicking. I mean, who else would check out some random-ass journal issues unless they had some sketchy plan? Nobody's out here doing light reading on the Hornasis mountain range for fun. Yeah, because everyone and their grandma's totally into researching obscure mountains, Klein thought sarcastically. Even as a history grad, he'd only heard of the Hornasis Peak from the Antigonus family's creepy notebook. The only people who'd be interested in this stuff are the nerdy lecturers and maybe some poor souls in academia. Tingen might be a city of universities, but you'd have to be pretty damn bored to hit up Deweyville Library for those journals. But the real kicker? Someone had checked that book out recently. Recently, as in, something's up. As Klein pieced it together, he couldn't help but mentally roast himself. Wow, Sherlock Holmes over here totally missed the clues. Guess I'm not cut out for detective work. Where's my magnifying glass when I need it? While Klein's brain spun, the boss of Evil Dragon Bar, Swain, raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem, mate?" Nah, just thinking about how I can track this dude down." "You know, Hanas Vincent bit the dust at home," Klein said, already ready with an excuse, like he was rehearsing for a B-grade crime drama. There was no way he was dragging the mandated punishers into the whole ancient relics from mysterious mountains drama. No one needed that. "Vincent? Huh? Yeah, that guy was one of the known fortune tellers around Tingen. Showed up here a lot," Swain said, not looking all that concerned. But then something clicked for the guy. "Now that I think about it, that gentleman you mentioned, he did come with Vincent the first time. That's what I wanted to know. You remember his name?" Klein leaned in, practically begging. Swain just shrugged with a grin. "Sorry, pal. I don't ask my customers for their names unless they're regulars like Old Neil." "Of course." Klein threw in a dramatic sigh, like he was auditioning for a soap opera. But no worries. He had another lead. The Deweyville Library. Anyone borrowing books there would have left a trail of ID behind. Even if the guy used fake info, Klein could still dig up some dirt for his next round of fortune teller voodoo. Time to play library detective. Klein wasn't rushing to the library just yet, though. First, shopping, because who knows when you'll need some weird ritual stuff, right? After wandering through a few shady back rooms, Klein hit the underground market. It was dead quiet. A few sketchy stalls and customers, but clearly not rush hour. Then, out of nowhere, he spotted a demisol, the death-sniffing weirdo, lurking in a corner. The guy looked like he'd seen some serious stuff. Pale, eyes twitching, like he was ready to sprint out of there. Their eyes met, and a demisol practically jumped out of his skin. Dude slapped his hands over his face and bolted toward a side door like Klein was the boogeyman. Really? Was almost blinding you that traumatic? Klein thought, his face stiff with a mix of amusement and annoyance. Come on, I'm not the devil, yet. Shaking his head, Klein moved on, shopping like a pro. In about 30 minutes, he'd blown through most of his stash. After counting his sad little leftover pile of 3 pounds and 17 soli, his heart hurt. But at least he had a bottle of floral essence tucked away like some kind of mystical first aid kit. He mentally ticked off his inventory. Amantha floral essence, Drago tree bark powder, essential oil from slumber flowers, dried chamomile petals, and my personal favorite, holy night powder. Like some kind of mystical hoarder, Klein made sure he knew exactly what weird ingredients were stuffed in every pocket. Just as he was leaving, something caught his eye, a familiar figure. It was a girl in a green dress, black hair all shiny and smooth, standing in front of a stall selling mysticism books. Wait, it's the girl from the carriage. She looks all right now, Klein thought, trying to play it cool. She was a mysticism enthusiast? That's a plot twist. Also, she was easily one of the prettiest girls Klein had seen since being dumped into this world. The girl, sweet and elegant, knelt in front of an ancient book titled Book of Witches. She was totally breaking some unspoken etiquette by touching it. But she was probably just curious. The vendor seized the chance to sell it. That book records some real witchy black magic. Worked for a friend of mine. Klein didn't stick around to hear more. He had more pressing matters, like racing to the Deweyville Library before his siblings starved to death over tomato oxtail soup. Meanwhile, in Backlund, Audrey Hall was doing her own version of fancy rich girl stuff at the Crown Turf Club. Draped in a white dress with lace and ruffles, looking like she stepped out of an expensive painting, she stood in the VIP room watching horses race by. As she stood there, her friend, Viscount Glaint, sidled up to her and whispered, "Audrey, every time I see you, you get more stunning." Like, damn. Audrey didn't even flinch. What do you want, Glaint? Normally, she'd be all flattered, but now she could see right through him. She knew that look. Dude wanted something. And sure enough, Glaint leaned in, all excited. I know a real Beyonder, not one of those royal family types. Audrey held back an eye roll. Every time this guy tried to flex with stories of Beyonders, it was a letdown. But still, she feigned excitement. Really? Yep. Swear on my dead dad's name. I saw him do some crazy stuff. Glaint practically whispered, like they were in some secret spy movie. Audrey put on her best wide-eyed, fake surprised expression. Can I meet him? She couldn't rely on the tarot club for everything, after all. Gotta make her own connections, right? Plus, she needed resources. Those 1,000 pounds she'd just spent weren't coming back anytime soon. Tomorrow afternoon, I'm hosting a literature and music salon, Glaint said, clearly pleased with Audrey's fake enthusiasm. Later, Klein hit the Deweyville Library with his probationary inspector badge ready. Channeling every cop show he'd ever seen, he declared, I'm with the Special Operations Department of the Awa County Police. I need your cooperation for an investigation. The librarians, thoroughly impressed, or just confused, nodded and let him through. Klein rattled off the journal names, including New Archaeology, and asked for the borrowing records for the past 2 months. As he flipped through the records, one name stood out, Sirius Arapis, cloth merchant, residing at 19 House Street. Well. Looks like it's time for a house call. Chapter 103, Doing as the Heart Will, lives at 19 House Street? Klein paused, digesting the info like he was staring at a crazy puzzle that had finally clicked into place. Wait a sec. Welch stayed on House Street. The Divination Club is on House Street. Now this shady cloth merchant, Sirius Arapis, also calls House Street home. Klein pieced it together like some mastermind detective, and suddenly the confusion over how Welch knew Hanass Vincent started to clear up. Welch didn't care about mysticism. He was more interested in stacking cash than stacking occult knowledge. But now it made sense. The rich folks on House Street formed their own little circle of connections. Sirius and Welch? Easy. Throw in Hanass Vincent, who liked to hang around the Divination Club, and bam! They're all chummy with each other. So, when Hanass wanted to sell off those creepy ancient books, Sirius probably went, "Hey Welch, I got a deal for you," and played middleman. Classic move. And don't even get Klein started on Hanas's dream, where the true creator made a cameo appearance. The dude was knee-deep in mystical madness. Klein wasn't ruling out the possibility that Sirius had influenced Hanas to join some sketchy secret society. Klein scratched his head, but the facts were lining up too perfectly to ignore. Even if this dude wasn't named Sirius Arapis, or lived at exactly 19 House Street, he was definitely creeping somewhere in that area. With these epiphanies bouncing around in his brain, Klein skimmed through the borrowing records again. This guy hadn't shown his face at the library since last Saturday, right before Hanas Vincent bit the dust. Coincidence? Klein didn't think so. The man was probably too spooked to come back. This coward is laying low, Klein thought. He figured the guy had two choices: haul his butt to the Hornassus mountain range if he had all the info, or stay hidden until the storm blew over. Klein decided he'd let his captain deal with this. After all, why risk his neck? Tomato oxtail soup was calling, and Klein wasn't about to miss out on that. Just as he was about to head out, a guy strutted into the library. His head down, looking all suspicious in his double-breasted coat. Klein nearly choked. Sirius Arapis? The timing was too ridiculous. Was he in some twisted reality show? Klein's body screamed in protest from soreness, so he kept walking like nothing was up. Play it cool, Klein. We ain't dying today. Sirius reached the counter to return some journals when the librarian stiffened like he'd seen a ghost. Suddenly, the dude yelled, "Officer, the criminal is here!" Ah, hell no. Klein's calm evaporated, and he whipped out his revolver as Sirius made a dash for the oriel window, thinking he could pull some action movie stunt by jumping through the glass. Klein fired, but missed. Well, that's just perfect, he thought, already lining up his next shot. Bang! The silver demon-hunting bullet hit its mark, and Sirius crashed through the window, leaving a trail of blood behind like some gruesome party favor. Klein bolted after him, flying out the window with the grace of someone who'd rather not be doing this at all. He better be worth the bruises I'm about to get. Sirius limped toward a nearby alley, slowing down. Klein's seer instincts kicked in, screaming, "This dude ain't human anymore." The blood Sirius was leaving behind? It had turned black. Klein slowed his pace. Hold up. This is not your average game of tag. His eyes darted to Sirius, who suddenly transformed into a feral nightmare, launching himself through the air like a rabid animal. Klein didn't panic, though. Breathe. Aim. Fire. He emptied his revolver into Sirius's head, each shot turning his face into a bloody mess. But Sirius? The guy wasn't going down easy. He staggered back to his feet, looking like he was possessed by every horror movie monster ever made. With no time to reload, Klein grabbed his cane and swung like his life depended on it. Because it did. Smack! The cane struck Sirius's neck, and Klein went full berserker, raining down blows until the guy crumpled to the ground in a twitching heap. Breathing heavily, Klein stared at the battered body. Yeah, no way I'm touching that until I reload. Klein reloaded his gun, then braced himself to search the body. Whatever I find better be worth all this trouble. After doing this, he collected himself and fought back his disgust, kneeling down to search the pockets of Sirius's double-breasted coat. Chapter 104. Mr. Z. 1 pocket, 2 pockets, 3 pockets. Klein soon found a blood-stained wallet, a Deweyville library card, 2 pairs of brass keys, an unstuffed smoking pipe, a sheathed dagger, and a few letters that were folded neatly. Not exactly a yard sale, but still quite the haul. Laying everything onto the ground except for the letters, he stood up straight and looked at the wallet. He confirmed that there were only 10 plus soli and some copper pennies, just enough to buy a cup of coffee if you're okay with instant. The craftsmanship of the wallet was quite exquisite. It's such a pity. Klein sighed, feeling a little distracted. If I didn't spend so much of my private stash of money, buying a wallet would have been on my schedule today. But hey, my fashion statement is mystery chic. After shaking his head, Klein opened the letters and quickly scanned through them. Dear Mr. Z, please allow me to defend myself. When Hanas and I sold off the Antigonus family's notebook, it wasn't stupidity or betrayal. It didn't appear special in any way when it was in our hands. Just your average family heirloom, right? Like Aunt Myrtle's creepy porcelain doll. I suspect that it's alive and that it's a wicked item armed with a certain life and wisdom. It was something dangerous that needed to be sealed. kind of like a can of expired beans. At different stages and before different people, it shows different contents. This is a proven fact that I've learned from the lamb in the police station. And let me tell you, that lamb knows its stuff. I mean, who doesn't love a good chat with a sheep? Although the notebook shows content that is sufficiently true each time with plenty of evidence, I believe that it would only reveal the completed content in the hands of a descendant of the Antigonus family. When Hanas and I received it, we could only see some trivial matters of the Antigonus family, the general situation of the nation of the Evernight on the main peak of the Hornasis mountain range, and also the 3 sequence potion formulas we handed in to you previously. You know, the usual family drama. As you know, the Secret Order has the seer pathway in its grasp and possesses powerful tracking abilities. So, Hanas and I believed that it would be a risky move to continue keeping the notebook. The value it had presented to us wasn't sufficient for us to take the risk. You can only have so many risk management meetings before you just want to throw in the towel. Since we couldn't wait for your reply, we agreed amongst ourselves to sell the notebook to Welch, who was living on the same street. He enjoyed collecting relics and ancient books, and he could afford to pay a high price for it. As for the subsequent developments, you are already aware of it. Spoiler alert, it didn't end well. This is the first thing that I'd like to explain. As I am writing these words, Hanas is dead. He died due to a heart attack during his sleep. That must be a blessing from God to prevent him from suffering the outcome of falling into the hands of heretics. God really knows how to manage a cleanup crew. I had no choice but to move to somewhere safer, more hidden. I didn't even dare to leave the house. Luckily, the lamb told me that the reason Hanas was being eyed by the heretics wasn't because of the Antigonus family's notebook, nor was his identity exposed. It was just that he had taken in a silly female disciple in the hopes of slowly developing her into one of us. Classic, trying to make a student out of a party animal mistake. His female disciple had stolen a glance at his secret incantation and tried the magic divination while a Nighthawk heretic was watching. I believe you can pretty much guess the rest of the story, so there is no need for me to describe it. Let's just say it involved a lot of screaming and bad decisions. It's a pity that the position of the lamb isn't high enough, so the actual details cannot be determined. From various feedback, it seems the heretics have yet to suspect me. Their investigations came to a halt due to Hanas's sudden death. Talk about a convenient way to lay low. Therefore, I will return to the streets and plan to borrow a few more journal issues from the Deweyville Library to seek out more clues. Nothing like a little late-night reading to keep the brain sharp. As a faction that also had the seer pathway in its grasp, the Antigonus family must have had some divinations regarding its decimation. They must have left behind secret treasures that would allow for the revival of the family. And possibly a secret stash of chocolate. There's sufficient reason to believe that the treasure is hidden on the main peak of the Hornasis mountain range, which is in one of the relics in the nation of the Evernight. Having read that, Klein's pupils constricted rapidly. He nearly dropped the letter. The pathway that the Antigonus family had in its grasp was the seer pathway? What a coincidence. I should start playing the lottery. Thunder seemed to boom in Klein's head again and again, leaving him in a daze. He felt as though it was destiny. The notebook that led to the original Klein's death and indirectly helped me transmigrate originated from the Antigonus family that has the seer pathway in its grasp. The one that eventually made me choose the seer potion was the Emperor Rosel's diary. While Emperor Rosel was biased towards the seer sequence because of the mysterious Mr. Zaratul, who was the leader of the Secret Order, which also has the seer pathway in its grasp. This is like a suffocating net sewn by fate, or a really intense web of conspiracy. Either way, my head is spinning. What exactly is lurking behind all of this? Klein held the letter and paced back and forth. He needed to verify the contents with other sources. Yes, the secret order that the Zaratul family controls is pursuing and searching for the belongings left behind by the Antigonus family. If both parties shared the same Beyonder sequence, there would be a sufficient reason and motive. Perhaps it is to bridge any missing sequences. obtain rare ingredients for a higher sequence advancement, or covet the other party's accumulated experiences in avoiding the loss of control. Like a really dysfunctional family reunion. Going by this line of thought, it is rather reasonable that the antagonist family has at least part of the seer sequence chain. Yes, when I was divining for clues pertaining to the clown potion, the images that emerged were mostly related to the Antigonus family. The only exception was the suited clown from the secret order. Therefore, the true meaning behind the symbolism is that each scene carries the possibility of obtaining the clown potion and a clue. However, I didn't understand the crux of the issue and regrettably missed it. Typical me, always missing the punchline. With the two corroborating evidence, Klein nearly believed the matters that Sirius had brought up in the letter. He also understood why he constantly heard the word hornasis in the murmurs he shouldn't be hearing. The earliest occurrence of this happening was when I first consumed the seer potion. He wore a serious expression as he thought to himself. Meanwhile, he guessed that being a survivor of those that made contact with a relic of the Antigonus family and becoming a beyonder of the seer pathway were two necessary conditions to hear the murmurs saying, Hornasis. Is there really a secret treasure buried within the ancient ruins on the main peak of the Hornasis mountain range by the Antigonus family? No, I can't think about this. Just the notebook alone has killed so many people. Any complete treasure would be even more terrifying. Klein shook his head subconsciously and cast his gaze onto the third piece of paper, which was the last of the letters. Honorable Mr. Z, I hope I can gain your assistance. I believe that you should be sufficiently interested in the treasure too. Who wouldn't be? Treasure hunting is practically a sport. Until then, I will make myself look like a normal person, a normal lover of history. You know, the kind who casually reads ancient tomes while sipping overpriced coffee. When the end of days arrives, I will offer all of Tingin's lambs as a sacrifice to God. Let's hope he's a fan of barbecues. Humbly, Sirius Arapis. When he finished reading Sirius's letter, Klein had the urge to laugh. Heh, why do I feel like I saved Tingen? What was this guy trying to do? Heretics are truly unbelievable. I mean, what's next? A heretic bake sale? Who is this Mr. Zede? He seems like someone in a high position. At the very least, he should be at the same sequence as Captain. Where was Sirius sending the letter to? He didn't write down the address. It seems like that's the cautiousness of a heretic. They wouldn't put the address on until the moment before they sent it out. Smart cookie. Right. If the Antigonus family had the potion of the seer pathway in its grasp, then would the clown potion be among the 3 formulas inside the Antigonus family's notebook that Sirius sent? Highly likely. In that instant, Klein seemed to have found clues to the clown potion. Although Sirius didn't bring the formula along with him, it was possible that he had left some form of record at his hideout. He must have also had it in his head, in his memories. Klein looked at the corpse before him and considered the problem of making a dead person speak. It required almost zero consideration, as an idea immediately popped into his head. Mediumship! Spirit mediums could directly communicate with spirits that had yet to disperse. Seers, mystery priors, and others could roughly accomplish the same thing using ritualistic magic. Previously, when he was dealing with the corpse of the sweeted clown, there were 3 things that had kept Klein from using mediumship. Firstly, he was in a hurry to save the rest. Secondly, he didn't have the ingredients with him. And lastly, he lacked confidence. Thus, he didn't consider the option of mediumship and missed his best chance. When they returned to Blackthorn Security Company, the spirit was mostly gone. Even a spirit medium could only get superficial information. But now, Klein happened to have all the ingredients and tools, and he happened to have the experience of communicating with lingering resentment through the help of dream divination. My only concern about contacting the spirit of a heretic would be being placed in the same situation as Captain's entry into Hanas's dream, where he saw a horrifying existence. However, Captain only remained frail for 2 days, and he wasn't considered severely injured. Yes, I could give it a try. He hesitated for less than 20 seconds before making a decision. He didn't want to miss out on this opportunity. He raised his head, turned around, and cast his gaze toward the spot where the window had shattered. There was a crowd gathered there watching. He took out his identification card and badge before returning to the broken window. He then told the onlookers through the shattered oriel window, "I am a probationary inspector from the Special Operations Department of the Awa County Police. I have shot the criminal to death. Please take this badge to the nearest police station and tell them to send backup to deal with the follow-up. The rest are to help me cordon off this area. Do not allow anyone to come close, for they might contaminate the scene." "Yes, officer." The librarian that caused Klein trouble quickly took the badge. When the entire scene was cordoned off and no one could enter the grass patch, Klein returned to the corner and stood by the side of the corpse. He was glad that the innocent crowd couldn't see the dead body, which looked more like a monster than a human. He put down his cane and revolver, then reached into the inner pocket of his windbreaker to take out a metal bottle. He was going to use the techniques of a mediumship ritual with dream divination to make the dead man speak. Chapter 105, Spirit Channeling. Klein twisted open the golden bottle's cap and brought it to his nose. He took a whiff of the stimulating scent that energized him, feeling like he was about to tackle Monday morning with a double shot of espresso. This was holy night powder made using slumber flowers, dragon bloodgrass, deep red sandalwood, mint, and other herbs. Since it was simple to concoct, Klein had whipped up a batch the moment he scored the ingredients from the underground market. Because, let's be real, when life gives you slumber flowers, you make some magical powder. It was going to be useful now. He poured a little of the holy night powder on his palm and collected himself. His irises turned dark, not because he was going emo, but because he was about to dabble in some serious spirit channeling. Next, Klein put away the metal bottle and scattered the powder onto the ground after infusing his spirituality into it, looking like he was setting the stage for a really intense rave. He scattered the powder as he walked, forming a circle around Sirius's corpse. Nothing like some good old ritualistic ambience to brighten up a gloomy scene, right? A formless barrier rose, separating them from the outside world, as if to say, "Sorry, folks, no entry to this ghostly party." Klein flicked away the remaining holy night powder on his hand and took out the other metal bottles. He sprinkled the Amantha Pure Dew and other liquids in the surrounding area, like a mixologist prepping a divine cocktail for the afterlife. The ritual he set up was different from the one Old Neil used at Ray Bieber's house, since the aim of the ritual was different. For example, Old Neil poured the liquids before using the holy night powder, creating a serene state second only to an actual altar. But Klein decided to switch things up. He used the holy night powder first, before pouring the liquids to keep Sirius's remnant spirituality from getting disturbed by the surrounding objects, while still managing to create an environment that met the ritual's requirements. Classic, don't disturb the ghosts etiquette. If he had used Old Neil's method, the rest of Sirius's spirituality would have been purged, making it impossible to establish a connection. Talk about a major ghosting. After finishing his preparations, Klein put away the materials and entered a state of cogitation. He recited the Hermes incantation softly. "I pray for the power of the dark night. I pray for the power of the mystery. I pray for the goddess loving grace. I pray that you'll allow me to communicate with the heretic spirituality inside this altar." As the incantations reverberated throughout the sealed space, Klein suddenly felt a massive, terrifying, and mysterious energy descend upon him. Kind of like when you realize you've eaten the last slice of pizza. Absolute panic. His eyes turned completely black, as though he had lost his pupils and the whites of his eyes, looking like the ultimate goth kid at a party. Seizing the opportunity, Klein recited a divination statement in his heart. The formula to the clown potion. The formula to the clown potion. As he was reciting the statement, he used cogitation to temporarily enter a dreamlike state. It was a hazy gray world without a sky or ground, kind of like his social life on a Friday night. Klein was unusually alert as he observed a transparent, ethereal figure looking like a TikTok ghost. He extended his right hand and touched the remnants of Sirius's spirit. Ooh, spooky. The scene in front of him changed with a rumble. It was a study table painted with dark red paint. There were 3 candles on a silver candle stand, as well as a blank piece of paper. Talk about mood lighting. Sirius had a pen in his hand. He wrote in Len language, This is the second formula. Its name in the notebook is clown. 80 milliliters of pure water, 5 drops of torn apple juice, 7 grams of black-rimmed sunflower powder, 10 grams of golden cloakgrass powder, 3 drops of poison hemlock. These are the supplementary ingredients. The main supernatural ingredients are 1 crystal of the single horn of a matured Hornacis gray mountain goat and a complete stalk of a human-faced rose. Sirius seemed to have the clown potion's formula memorized as he quickly finished writing it. The man was clearly a multitasker. He paused for a moment and took a sip of coffee, like a true academic, then unwound the silver pendulum around his wrist. He held the pendulum and closed his eyes, muttering terms to himself, such as the end of days, peace of mind, hope for the Lord's blessings, and confess. Basically, all the things you say when your life is going off the rails. After Sirius finished his prayer, Klein finally saw the pendulum clearly. Under the wound silver chain was a thumb-sized human figurine. The figurine had a single eye, a trait unique to giants. It was facing down, its legs bound by chains that connected upwards. If this isn't a don't ask, don't tell situation, I don't know what is. At that moment, the single eye of the giant suddenly had a faint red glow. Yikes! Crack! The scene Klein witnessed shattered as his legs buckled, almost causing him to kneel to the ground. Nothing like a shocking revelation to make you feel like you're back in high school and the teacher just called on you. Klein felt pain in his head as though he had been ruthlessly struck with a bat. His vision turned blood red as his hands involuntarily reached out to protect his knees. Talk about overreacting. He recovered several seconds later and stood back up, feeling unusually weak as if he had heard the murmurings that penetrated his mind once again. But thanks to his magic medicine skills, the adverse reaction calmed down quickly. The hanged giant, the true creator. Sirius and Hanas were both members of the Aurora Order, but the captain saw a huge cross in Hanas's dream. The terrifying being crucified on the cross wasn't the Aurora Order's hanged giant. Klein took 2 deep breaths and waited for his spirituality to slowly recover. Classic self-care, am I right? The Aurora Order was a secret organization that sprang into existence about 200 to 300 years ago. They worshipped the true creator and symbolized him with the hanged giant. They believed that every human being had divine qualities, and as long as they persevered and made it through countless trials, they could become angels. Because who doesn't want to be a celestial being? According to the internal records of the Nighthawks, the Sequence 9 of the Aurora Order was secret suppliant. These Beyonders could sense the existence of mysterious and horrifying beings, and were armed with a decent amount of knowledge regarding sacrifices and some knowledge on ritualistic magic. Enough said. If you're a secret suppliant, you're probably not getting invited to any dinner parties. Little was known about the Sequence 7 that the Aurora Order had grasped. Sequence 8 was Listener. This was considered quite a terrifying job for a Beyonder. Every listener could listen directly to the whispers of the secret entities, making them the life of the party, if you wanted the party to be extremely uncomfortable. But consequently, if they were unable to advance, it was difficult for them to survive the next 5 years after becoming a listener. Furthermore, the Nighthawks had reported that every listener was a lunatic. Even if they looked normal on the surface, they were always crazy on the inside, just like that one friend who always talks about conspiracy theories at brunch. The details of the report regarding the Aurora Order flashed through Klein's mind. His initial theory was that Sirius was a secret suppliant. From the description, secret suppliants are as hopeless as seers in battle. That does fit Sirius's actions just now. What happened later was a loss of control brought about by the injury. Yes, Fry once said that every Beyonder would undergo some weird changes after they die. Klein thought as he tapped 4 points on his chest to praise the goddess. Hallelujah! After his spirituality recovered slightly, he concluded the ritual with the appropriate procedure and dismantled the wall of spirituality. With a whoosh, a gust of wind blew as Klein forced himself to look at Sirius's corpse. He noticed that there was still an obvious wart on Sirius's mangled, as well as the majestic palace on the main peak of the Hornacis mountain range and the formless focus on him. He took the opportunity to mention it in passing. Dunn surveyed the surroundings and, with his gray eyes trained on Klein, asked, You tried channeling his spirit? There were still traces of holy night powder and the scent of the essential oils. Yes, Klein replied truthfully. I was worried that you would arrive late and that the remains of his spirituality would scatter. You don't look well. Are you all right? The short Kenley asked in concern. Klein passed Sirius's undelivered letter to the captain and began from the beginning. When I went to the underground market to purchase materials for the rituals, I suddenly remembered that Selena had also once gone to the evil dragon bar and that it was Hanas Vincent that brought her there. This meant that Hanas was a regular there. Thus, I suspected that the person in the portrait, someone who's definitely connected to Hanas, might have gone to the underground market too. I asked the boss Swain about the portrait, and he gave me confirmation. He told me that the man had once tried to buy documents and items related to the Hornasis Mountains. That reminded me of the library. I recalled that the librarian had mentioned that someone had just returned the journal issue I wanted to borrow. Leonard stood to the side, listening with a smile. He suddenly interrupted. And so you brought your identification documents and badge here to flip through the borrowing records? Actually, I am very curious. Why would you come into conflict with this man here? Even if it was a direct encounter with your style of doing things, you would have pretended that you didn't know him and would just leave the library. Then you would come to Zautelan Street to ask for our help. Yes, there was no need for you to take the risk. As long as you confirm the target and that he hasn't left Tingjin, there would always be a way to find him, Dunn added as he reviewed the letter. Klein immediately said in embarrassment. The librarian recognized him and shouted for the police to help. There's no way I could have pretended not to hear that. Leonard and Kenley looked at each other. One tried to cover his amusement, while the other turned his head to the side. Dunn nodded, his gaze leaving the letters. Did you get anything from channeling his spirit? I saw a pendulum that took the shape of a hanged giant. I saw a blood-red glow flash in the giant's only eye before I was forced out of the ritual, Klein described honestly. He didn't want to talk about the clown potion for the time being, as he had two considerations. First, if Dunn and the rest were able to find Sirius's hideout and the corresponding records, then it would make no difference if he told them or not, as there would be no additional contributions attributed to him. Second, if Dunn and the rest were unable to find it, he could report it in the future. This way, he would be awarded with another contribution, allowing him to acquire the ingredients needed to concoct a potion. This was a way to obtain double the rewards for a single task, a technique that stemmed from old Neil's recent teachings. Aurora Order? Dunn muttered to himself before he asked some relevant questions. After Klein answered all his questions, he saw the fatigue in Klein's eyes and waved his cane. Not bad. You foiled a scheme that was targeting Tingjin. You can go back and rest. Kenley, bring old Neil over. After giving out instructions, Dunn smiled bitterly and shook his head. Before Sequence 6, Beyonders of the Sleepless Pathway lack many supplemental abilities. We can only conduct the simplest of ritualistic magic. Captain, you mean that from Sequence 6 onwards, a Sleepless Pathway Beyonder would gain improvements in the corresponding aspects? Klein asked out of curiosity. Yes, Dunn confirmed. After leaving the Daffodil Street Library, Klein nearly fell asleep in the carriage on multiple occasions on his way back to Daffodil Street. He lumbered into the house. He then removed his hat and jacket before falling asleep on the sofa. Sometime later, he woke up abruptly, took out his pocket watch, and snapped it open. Melissa will be back in half an hour, Benson in 45 minutes. If I don't get up, I'll have to make them wait an hour before we can have dinner. Klein rubbed his forehead as he entered the kitchen. He washed his face with cold water, then took out the oxtail, tomatoes, carrots, and onions he had bought that afternoon. After he prepared the ingredients, he suddenly froze. He had the feeling that his actions just now formed a strange juxtaposition with the incident that afternoon. I'm a man who just saved Tingjin, Klein mumbled in amusement. He put on a white apron and got to making dinner. Chapter 106, Artist Klein. After 8 in the evening, in the Moretti family's dining room. As he looked at the shallow soup left in the bowl, Benson raised his hand to cover his mouth and let out a satisfied burp that echoed like a trumpet. Although that was our third time eating it, I still find it delicious. The sourness and sweetness of the tomato and the chewy texture of the oxtail blend into a perfect and unique flavor. Klein, I'm sorry that the Blackthorn Security Company caused Tinjin City to lose such an outstanding chef. Seriously, if cooking were a crime, you'd be serving a life sentence. Melissa leaned backward in her chair, nodding in agreement silently, as if she was attending a gourmet cooking seminar. This is because you have yet to try real cooking. Klein smiled humbly, like someone who just discovered fire. If we have a chance in the future, let's head to Bonaparte Restaurant on House Street for some authentic Intis cuisine. And also to Coastline Restaurant in the Golden Indus Borough for some southern delicacies. Those places are so fancy, even the rats wear tuxedos. These were restaurants that were always covered in the newspapers, where the average cost per person was around £1.50. I like your cooking more, Melissa answered without hesitation, making Klein's heart swell with pride like a balloon at a kid's birthday party. Benson chuckled and changed the topic, trying to avoid a full-blown food worship session. But I ultimately feel that there's something lacking from the tomato oxtail soup. Perhaps it shouldn't be eaten with bread? Klein nodded in agreement, his expression serious as a detective in a noir film. It's best complemented with rice. Bread is great, but rice is like the superhero of side dishes. Rice, Melissa muttered with an expression of yearning, like a kid in a candy store who only sees broccoli. Tianjin, which was located north, wasn't considered a big city. Besides a few particular restaurants, it was difficult to find rice, let alone enjoy it. To Benson and Melissa, this kind of food only existed in the descriptions of newspapers and textbooks, which were about as useful as a chocolate teapot when it came to satisfying their cravings. Looking at his sister's expression, Klein laughed. Wait till we save another 6 months' salary, and we will find a chance to go on vacation in Desi Bay and try the delicacies there. Desi Bay was located in the far south of the Loan Kingdom, and a third of it belonged to Finapotter Kingdom. It had plenty of sunlight and beautiful scenery, and the paella there was so good it could make you weep. Before Melissa could share her opinion on saving money, Klein said, "In another 3 months, I should get another raise. By then, we could totally fulfill our desire to travel as well as save money for necessities." Why? Benson and Melissa's attention was redirected like moths to a flame. Klein coughed lightly, trying to sound more professional than a guy in a pizza shop. Due to my professionalism, the police department, which always collaborates with our company, intends to hire me as their part-time history consultant. They would pay me extra, at least £2 a week. If you see me in a police uniform in the future and showing the corresponding police documentation, please don't be shocked. I promise I won't be chasing down donuts. Of course, as you know, the work efficiency in governmental departments is as slow as a 90-year-old lady's footsteps. They still have to go through a lengthy procedure, and they're required to do a thorough inspection of me. Hence, on my off days for the next 2 months, I'll be heading to Koy University quite often to see my mentor and the teaching staff I know to learn more. Seeing the shocked look in his brother and sister's eyes, he paused and said with a strange expression, "Just like Emperor Roselle said, one is never too old to learn. But in your case, Benson, I think you might need a miracle or two." Benson maintained a few seconds of silence before saying in a half self-deprecating and half emotional manner, "Is it too late for me to sign up for university? Knowledge really is wealth, and I could use a few pounds in my pocket. And also power." Klein added silently, thinking about how knowledge could turn a mundane life into an epic saga. "Benson, you need Klein's grammar books and his classic literature textbooks," Melissa said out of the blue, stealing the words from Klein's mouth faster than a thief in the night. Benson's expression seemed to change like a light switch. He gritted his teeth and said, "Klein, pass me those books tonight. Even if all they do is put me to sleep, I am determined to read them for an hour. No, an hour and a half a day. I swear in the name of the goddess. If I can't do it, I will be a curly-haired baboon. And I will make sure my new hairstyle will be trending on all social media." A smile immediately plastered across Klein's face. No problem. If you're serious about it, I can get you a bedazzled banana costume to match. The next morning, Klein hung his coat and hat on the clothes rack in the break room. Then he followed Roseanne's instructions and walked to the basement to the duty room outside Chanis Gate. Captain Dunn and members Fry, Sika, Royale, Leonard, and Kenley were all there, probably discussing the best ways to brew coffee strong enough to wake the dead. As his gray eyes glanced past the newly promoted Nighthawk, Dunn smiled and said, "We have a routine meeting every Thursday to summarize past missions and discuss various challenges. It's the kind of fun that makes you question your life choices." I am a man who has endured the test of many regular meetings as well. Klein lampooned, thinking about how he'd rather watch paint dry. He found a seat and joked, "Do I need to introduce myself? Or should I just tell you about my superhero alter ego?" Dunn smiled and turned to look at Kenley, who probably had more serious stories than a noir film. "Briefly tell us about the investigation of Sirius Arapis." Kenley was also a Nighthawk who'd been promoted from a member of the civilian staff. He wasn't very tall. His brown hair was quite thick. His body size was average, and he looked like someone who was smart and capable, like a nerd, but with muscles. He thought and said, "With old Neil's help, we found Sirius's secret hideout. There were many books and items at the scene. From them, we can be certain that Sirius was one of the underground members of the secret organization, the Aurora Order. He was also a secret suppliant. You know, the type who'd sell you their grandma for a couple of pounds. There's sufficient evidence to show that he and Hanas Vincent sold the Antigonus family notebook to Welch. Those who don't remember Welch can ask Klein about him. Just don't ask too many questions, or you might get a headache." We found valuable items, including 3 sequence potion formulas, which are sequence 9 Seer, sequence 8 Apprentice, and sequence 8 Clown. And trust me, the last one is not a joke, even though it sounds like a bad punchline. The subsequent task is to use Sirius's social circle and the letters we found to locate other outer circle members of the Aurora Order. The focus of our search will be directed at the heretic who has infiltrated the police department. This is where it gets spicy, folks. Also, people who were in contact with Hanas need to be reinvestigated. Dunn nodded lightly and looked towards Klein, who was trying to hide his excitement. "As you heard just now, we've obtained the clown potion formula, but are unable to determine if it's real. We have to wait for the Holy Cathedral to give us feedback, because, divine bureaucracy is a thing." In the mission relating to the Aurora Order, you have made a crucial contribution. Plus, given that you shot a member of the secret order, it won't be long until you accrue enough contributions to be promoted. But I have to remind you that not everyone is like Daly. You have to suppress your desire and wait for 3 years. In order to avoid losing control, you can't allow your mindset to be affected by our discovery of the clown potion formula. Captain, you don't understand how magical it is to act. I have already confirmed the authenticity of the clown potion formula using divination above the gray fog last night. Klein nodded obediently, feeling like he was in a spy movie. I will keep my emotions in check. No clowns allowed, unless it's at a birthday party. Then Sikatron, the quiet midnight poet with white hair and black eyes, said, "We still haven't found any clues regarding instigator Triss. I suspect that he has already fled from Tingen, probably enjoying a pina colada on a beach somewhere." After they were done exchanging their new information, Klein left the duty room and found old Neil to continue his mysticism lessons. In the afternoon, he went over to his combat teacher, Gawain, to do basic strength, endurance, and overall coordination training, because even heroes need to hit the gym. With the sun still up and bright at 5. Klein took off his training costume, took a quick shower, and changed into his original clothing. He then took the public carriage to Beswick Street. He hadn't forgotten about the red chimney that he had seen in his dream divination, nor did he forget about the man that he suspected to be a member of the psychology alchemists who had bought supplementary ingredients for the spectator potion in the underground market. These things would be inconvenient to investigate in his role as a Nighthawk. Number 27. Henry's Private Detective Company. Yup, it's here. Klein found a private detective company according to the newspaper's descriptions. It was said to be trustworthy. He put on a mask, lowered his top hat, and flipped up his collar. He walked up the stairs and came to the company on the second floor. Knock! 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 He knocked on the door that was half closed. Please come in, said a voice that seemed to be affected by phlegm. Klein lifted his cane and pushed the door to enter. He saw the detective company using an almost open layout. There were 4 employees sitting at their respective seats partitioned into small cubicles. Hi, I'm Detective Henry. How may I help you? A man in a white shirt and black vest greeted him. He held a smoking pipe in his hand, and he had a prominent jawline, blade-like eyebrows, and dark blue eyes that sized up his client. Klein used the collar of his windbreaker to block half of his face as he spoke. I have 2 matters to entrust to you. How are your rates? That depends on the difficulty of the task. Detective Henry retracted his gaze and pointed towards the sofa in the guest area. Let's talk over there. Klein followed him to the semi-partitioned area and sat on the single-seat sofa. He didn't take off his coat, nor did he take off his hat and mask. He purposely made his voice hoarse and said, First, I need you to help me find a house with a chimney that looks like this, as well as information on who the owner and current tenant are. As he spoke, he took out a neatly folded paper. When he opened it, there was a chimney with its color noted down and its surrounding scenery. This was the drawing that Klein completed by using the uniqueness of the area above the gray fog and the method of praying to himself. What a great drawing, Detective Henry complimented subconsciously. He then knitted his eyebrows and said, This is not complicated but very tedious. It would require a long time and a large amount of manpower. I understand, Klein nodded lightly. Detective Henry pondered for a moment and said, £7. The price for this job would be £7. In addition, you have to give me at least 2 weeks. All right. Second, help me find this gentleman and find out his identity. The only thing I know is that he occasionally appears at the Evil Dragon Bar near the Harbor Borough, and he must not detect any men you send. He is very sensitive and he has terrifying observational skills. Klein took out the second portrait. He intended to get in touch with a member of the Psychology Alchemists to see if he could find any valuable information and materials. For example, perhaps a formula that could be exchanged with justice? £3. Such a mission would cost about £3 or £4. Your outstanding drawing skills will help my assistant and I save time, Detective Henry replied skillfully. £10 in total? Klein found the price upsetting. Detective Henry took a puff on his pipe and said, Yes, and you need to put a deposit of £2. When there's progress, you'll need to pay another £3 to £5. The rest of the payment can be made when the mission is completed. Then I shall come next week to check on your progress. Klein didn't haggle over the price to prevent the observant detective from remembering any of his characteristics. After they signed a standard contract, he took out 2 one-pound notes and passed them to the detective. He only had £1 and 17 soldi left from his savings. As Detective Henry watched the man wearing a gauze mask and a black windbreaker with its collar raised leave in a hurry, he had a suspicious look in his eyes as he smoked his pipe. Why is he looking for a house that has that kind of chimney? He must be an artist, or at least a professional sketch artist of some sort. In the afternoon, in Viscount Glaint's luxurious mansion, Audrey, with her maidservant in tow, followed etiquette and passed her hand to the host. She looked at him, giving her hand a quick peck. Your beauty accentuates my salon, Glaint first gave a compliment as usual. Then he lowered his voice and said, That lady is already here. She's a beyonder and also an author. Chapter 107, Force. Audrey leaned back, casually observing Glaint's reaction like she was watching someone try too hard to impress on a first date. At least she didn't have to worry about her maidservant, Annie, overhearing since their chat was about as mundane as a grocery list. Glaint straightened up with a chuckle. Yes, you must have read her stuff before. Four's Wall. She wrote Stormwind Mountain Villa. It's been the rage for months. Audrey nodded with a faint smile, thinking, Oh, Lady Sissy, the calmest rich lady in fiction. Yeah, I like that. A month ago. But inwardly, she rolled her eyes so hard they could have gone on a world tour. Because the truth? She hadn't touched that book in weeks, ever since she joined the Tarot Club and discovered real mysticism. Beyonders and secret knowledge were way more thrilling than reading about posh ladies sipping tea. Glaint, still riding the wave of his own ego, led Audrey to a fancy sofa. You'll love Forswall. She's just like Lady Sissy. Calm, intellectual, lazy. Audrey raised an eyebrow. Lazy. Yeah, sounds like a Tinder bio. Oh, and Miss Audrey, Glaint added, not missing a beat. You're going to play the piano for us later, right? That's the ultimate compliment for any author. Audrey gave him the side eye. Glaint was clearly showing off, like, hey everyone, I know rich people who can play piano. Bow before me. She smiled politely. Mr. Vecanel, my piano teacher says I'm rusty. Needs more practice. Translation? I'd rather not, but thanks for making this awkward, dude. Just as Glaint was awkwardly trying to change the subject, he spotted a lady stuffing her face with dessert. Audrey, meet Miss Forswall, the author of Stormwind Mountain Villa. Audrey turned and gave her the old up and down. Fors was about 23, rocking a pale yellow dress and a face that said, I've seen some things. She had brown hair, slightly curly, and pale blue eyes that had, I'm too cool for this, written all over them. In less than 3 seconds, Audrey had already made some observations. Fors's fingers are stained yellow, cigarette lover. And those calluses? She's been working that pen hard. But Fors also had some muscle, like she could probably arm wrestle a bro and win. Definitely not the usual noodle-armed author. Either she was born that way, or she's got a past that doesn't scream sitting at a desk writing all day. As Fors smiled with an air of, I'm better than you, Audrey's brain was in overdrive. This girl's definitely a beyonder. She knows more than she's letting on. Why would she approach Glaint, though? Money? Ingredients? Or does she need help with something? Glaint, oblivious to Audrey's detective-level thoughts, introduced her like a used car salesman hyping up a rare find. Miss Fors, this is Audrey, Backlund's finest gem. Her dad's Count Hall, a big deal in the cabinet. You know, no pressure or anything. Audrey smiled sweetly. Good afternoon, Miss Fors. Your book's still by my bed. Because I haven't bothered to finish it. They exchanged pleasantries like two celebrities fake smiling on a red carpet. Fors moved back to the dessert table, eyeing a cream cake like it owed her money. Audrey turned her attention back to Glaint, and they headed to the living room. But just as Audrey, in all her spectator glory, was thinking about her next move, her dress betrayed her. She stepped on it and almost face-planted right then and there. Annie, her ever-vigilant maid, caught her just in time, whispering, Miss, the dress is designed for elegance, not speed-walking. Audrey, face flushed, nodded. Thanks for the memo, Annie. I totally didn't notice. For the rest of the salon, Audrey went through the motions, meeting authors, critics, and musicians, all while keeping that polite smile. My face is starting to cramp. Eventually, Glaint signaled it was time to dip. Audrey excused herself, claiming she needed the washroom, and made her way to the study, with Annie guarding the door like a loyal bouncer. Audrey entered the study, locking the door behind her. Glaint sat behind a desk, twirling a pen like he was waiting for a secret agent briefing. Fors stood by a bookshelf, casually flipping through a book like she wasn't about to drop a bombshell. Glaint gestured dramatically. Let me properly introduce you. Forswall, a true beyonder. Audrey faked a surprised expression. Oh, is that so? Fors, not missing a beat, sauntered over to the door and reached out to the handle. Suddenly, Audrey's vision blurred. Fors turned all ghost-like and passed through the door. Within seconds, the door unlocked, and Fors walked back in with a smug grin. Annie, standing just outside, was none the wiser. Glaint's eyes sparkled like a kid at a magic show. That's incredible! Audrey, on the other hand, was piecing it all together. Why does someone with these abilities need Glaint? Fors chuckled. Let's be real here. We're on a time crunch. She leaned against the desk, casually explaining her backstory. I was a doctor once. Got into this beyonder business over 2 years ago. Now, I need your help, and in return, I'll hook you up with the formula for a sequence potion. Glaint, who clearly wasn't ready for such a deal, asked, What exactly do you need us to do? Fors didn't miss a beat. I've got a partner locked up waiting for a verdict. I want you to help bust her out. How? I don't care. Audrey frowned. Fors, with your abilities, why aren't you doing it yourself? Fors laughed. Oh, I can't do it. My powers are useless for this mission. Plus, risking my neck? Nah, I've got better things to do. Audrey's spectator instincts were tingling, so she asked, I understand, but what exactly is your partner in for? Fours shifted uncomfortably, scratching the back of her neck. Well, she's got a knack for, persuading people, a little too forcefully. After handing out the mission, Klein followed his original schedule of mysticism lessons in the morning and combat lessons in the afternoon. The regularity of his life almost made him forget that he was a member of the Nighthawks. The curse of often encountering supernatural incidents seemed to disappear as well. It was Saturday, his turn to guard Chanis Gate. You can enjoy the coffee I left here or the black tea in the clerk's office. Dunn surveyed the room with his deep gray eyes. Klein, who had already given an excuse to his siblings, nodded in joy. All right, Captain. You sure are a generous gentleman. Dunn laughed. Those will help you relax. Being tense all the time is not good for your health. He took his hat and cane and walked toward the door. As he was exiting the door, he suddenly turned around and said, I forgot to remind you. Do not open Chanis Gate no matter what you hear, unless it is opened from the inside. Remember, no matter what you hear, no matter what happens. Captain, that's a little scary. Klein tensed up instantly. He felt the darkness of the basement triumph over the light of the gas lamp. Chapter 108, Deep into the Night. Despite it not being dawn yet, the underground chamber, well ventilated but eerily quiet and dark, was lit up by dim yellow gas lamps. These lamps tried their best to bring some light to the tunnel, much like a flashlight with a dying battery. You know it's barely hanging on, but you're hoping it gets you through. Klein sat in the duty room, flipping through newspapers, magazines, and books that were stacked before him, though his attention was split between them and the possibility of someone barging in through the Chanis Gate like a drunk guy crashing a house party. His windbreaker and top hat were hung neatly on a rack by the entrance, while his cane leaned against the wall in case things got wild. Klein had the look of someone prepared for anything, like a man ready to flee an awkward first date. The rich aroma of coffee filled the air, and Klein took a deep sniff, because let's be honest, coffee is a gift from the gods. He massaged his temples, trying to fight off the feeling of his brain being wrapped in a foggy blanket of exhaustion. Back when he was a college student on Earth, pulling all-nighters was a lifestyle. He'd stay up until 5 in the morning, powered by video games, novels, TV shows, and caffeine, only to somehow make it through the next day like it was no big deal. Ah, the good old days, he thought, reminiscing on a time when staying up felt like a superpower instead of a slow march towards death. But this world? Yeah, no Netflix, no video games, not even a meme to scroll through. It was just the silence, his thoughts, and maybe the occasional questionable fashion magazine. Seriously, Emperor Roselle, he muttered to himself, if you're going to revolutionize this world, at least bring in the good stuff, like Wi-Fi or a smartphone. Lead these poor souls into the information age already. With a resigned sigh, he accepted his fate and took another sip of coffee. The bitter liquid washed over his tongue, keeping him alert, even if the flavor punched him in the face. Fermo coffee from the Paz Valley. Bitter as hell, but does the trick, he mumbled, tipping his cup in mock salute to the coffee gods. Klein's mind wandered as he reflected on the Paz Valley, a region being fought over by the Intis Republic and the Loan Kingdom. Because nothing says, this coffee is worth it, like two countries going to war over the beans. After a moment of staring into space, Klein picked up a magazine from the pile and chuckled when he saw the title, Ladies' Aesthetic. Roseanne must have left it there. Klein flipped through it out of pure curiosity, partly because he had nothing better to do, and partly because, well, fashion could be amusing. The magazine was filled with monochrome pictures showing famous actors and models. It reminded Klein of fashion magazines from back on Earth, the kind that somehow convinced you that wearing impractical outfits made you look like a superhero instead of someone who lost a bet. Not bad, he said, eyeing a dress and the woman wearing it. He may be lost in another world, but hey, he was still a man who could appreciate beauty. However, his heart remained focused on one goal, finding a way back home. No point in forming any romantic entanglements here. Besides, streetwalkers? Yeah, no thanks. Klein had standards, germaphobe-level standards. A wave of melancholy hit him as he thought of his siblings, Benson and Melissa. No matter what he did, they were his anchor, the the ones he couldn't forget. One way or another, he had to make it up to them. He sighed deeply, his heart feeling heavier than his body after pulling an all-nighter with no caffeine. Shaking off the gloom, he reached for a novel instead. Stormwind Mountain Villa by Fours Wall. Klein smirked as he opened the book. A classic Gothic setup. Lady Sissy, 1.65 meters tall and 98 pounds, starts working as a home tutor. Is this world's version of Jane Eyre? He wondered, flipping through the pages. But just when he thought it was a romance novel, boom, evil spirits. And right when he thought it was a ghost story, Lady Sissy pulled out some Sherlock Holmes-level deduction skills. Klein's eyebrow shot up. What the hell am I reading? The story took him on a roller coaster of genres, from detective thriller to amnesia drama. And in the end, yes, it was a romance book. Classic. Thump, 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 thump. Klein nearly jumped out of his skin as a loud knocking sound echoed through the corridor. In an instant, he reached for his revolver, hands trembling like a gamer who just found a final boss after playing for hours straight. Thump! Thump! Bang! Bang! The pounding got louder. Klein's eyes darted towards the Chanis gate, which was trembling like someone had unleashed the Hulk on the other side. Oh, hell no. My first day on the job and I get this? Klein muttered, cold sweat forming on his forehead. Did I get cursed with some unlucky constitution after transmigrating? He remembered the captain's strict instructions. Never open the Chanis gate unless it's open from the inside. Yeah, definitely not opening that, he thought, calming down slightly. But then, crack! A sharp grinding sound made his stomach drop. He turned to see a figure emerging from the crack in the gate. It was small, dressed in a regal black gown, with a creepy cloth puppet face staring at him. Of course, it's a creepy puppet, Klein thought bitterly. Why couldn't it be a cute one? Before Klein could raise his revolver, the puppet unfurled a piece of paper with mysterious symbols, including a vertical eye that seemed to bore into his soul. Then, without warning, it was yanked back behind the gate like it was sucked into a vortex. Silence returned. The gate sealed once more. Klein stood there, shaking, his brain struggling to catch up with what just happened. I'm telling the captain about this. But seriously, a haunted puppet? Am I in a horror movie? He pulled a rope to sound the alarm, knowing this wasn't something he wanted to deal with alone. Upstairs, Leonard Mitchell and the other sleepless heard the call and raced to the basement, ready to confront whatever insanity had just been unleashed. Chapter 109, Deduction. The sound of running footsteps hit Klein's ears, calming him as he stood near the entrance of the guardroom like he wasn't just about to lose it. Leonard arrived first, gripping his revolver like he was in a Wild West showdown. In a serious voice, he asked, "What happened?" Klein couldn't help but recall something Roseanne had spilled tea on. 3 years ago, Leonard, fresh off becoming sleepless, tried running down the stairs. Let's just say his relationship with gravity wasn't great back then. Dude ended up rolling down like a human snowball. Now, seeing him trying to be all cool, Klein coughed and pointed at Chanis gate. There was knocking, then banging, and next thing I knew, the door got pushed open a little. Chanis gate? Opened? Kenley's voice shot up a notch, eyes bugging out. Yeah, it cracked open, Klein confirmed. He noticed Leonard, Kenley, and Royale pulling up short, forming some tactical back-off bro arc a few steps away, clearly not vibing with the idea of getting too close to him. Klein raised an eyebrow. You guys suspect me? Kenley shook his head. Nah, bro. Protocol. In the middle of the tension, Leonard kept his usual attitude, tossing in a laugh. Not the first time this happened. At some churches, the dude guarding Chanis Gate lost control, yanked the bell, and, well, took out 2 teammates like a rogue gamer. Ah, cool, Klein replied, feeling less salty about being treated like he might go all Hulk smash on them. So, how do I prove I haven't lost my marbles? Leonard wiped his smirk off, thumped his chest 4 times, and began to chant, sounding like a solemn mix of Morgan Freeman and a guy running a late-night ASMR channel. They've got no clothes or food, freezing their butts off, rain's pouring down, hiding under rocks because there's nowhere else to go. Snatched from the breast, hope long gone, the Evernight didn't forget them, still blessed them with love. A heavy silence fell. Everyone, even their souls, felt squeaky clean. Leonard cracked a smile. You're good, bro. Still our guy. Royale, who had stayed chill so far, glanced at Chanis Gate. What did you see when the door cracked open? Klein's face tightened. I saw 30625, the misfortune cloth puppet, the one rockin' that old school black gown. But 3 seconds later, something yanked it back and shut the door like someone slammed a book after reading spoilers. Leonard, Kenley, and Royale exchanged knowing looks. We're as clueless as you, dude, Leonard said with a chuckle. Since the doors closed again, let's wait until dawn for the captain. Royale added in her calm, Ice Queen way, I'll stay here and help guard. Leonard wiggled his fingers like a magician about to pull a rabbit from a hat. As the strongest guy here, I'll hang too. Kenley, go back upstairs in case the police need backup. You know, just in case. Kenley just gave a nod and bounced. Leonard turned to Klein and Royale. How about we keep it light? Maybe another round of cards? We need something fun to get through the night. No problem. Klein holstered his revolver like a gunslinger, while Royale just stroked her sleek black hair, gliding into the guardroom like a cat. As they started the card game, Klein casually said, About 30625, it's not supposed to move, right? Leonard, throwing out cards with a ha-ha smirk, replied, In the last 40 years, that creepy doll hasn't done a thing. Let's assume the info's right for now. Pass, Royale said, eyes focused. You got a theory? Leonard sipped his coffee like Sherlock Holmes on a Starbucks run. If 30625 isn't supposed to move, then something recent triggered it. If it was long-standing, we'd have noticed earlier. Anything odd happened recently with Chanis Gate? Royale tossed out her cards, watching Klein play his hand. There's just one thing, Royale mused. The Antigonus family's notebook and the sealed artifact 2049 were stored behind Chanis Gate for a night. Leonard tapped the table. If 2049 was the problem, Backlund's Gate would have had a meltdown by now. I'm betting it's the Antigonus family's notebook. Klein scratched his head. That sounds about right. Didn't expect you to be this sharp, Leonard. Maybe all those detective novels are paying off. Royale, as cool as ever, laid down her cards. 2 kings and a straight from 8 to king. Anyone want that? No? Good. 3 sixes, and I'm out. Both Klein and Leonard paused, suddenly realizing they forgot something important. Royale was the evil in this round. Klein, seeing her reshuffle the deck like a Vegas pro, tossed out another question. What force pulled 30625 back? Leonard chuckled, giving Klein a side-eye. You really think the defenses behind Chanis Gate are just a couple old dudes and a locked door? Kinda, Klein replied. Leonard leaned back. When night falls, the keepers leave, because the power inside becomes too dangerous. It's only chill during the day. The captain probably forgot to mention that. Defensive mechanisms like mega amulets? Klein asked, catching on to the drift. Royale nodded. Exactly. The gate draws power from the prayers of the faithful. They keep the spiritual nexus strong. Klein nodded, though his card game was looking bleak. Leonard then dropped the real bomb. Oh, and don't forget, St. Selena's ashes are buried inside too. High sequence Beyonder back in the day. Klein blinked. St. Selena? Like for real? Yeah, rumors say that remains of high-level Beyonders still hold power. Just rumors, though. Hours passed, and nothing weird happened at Chanis Gate again, but Klein lost 2 solly. It stung. Leonard, though, with all his romantic poet vibes, lost even more. 4 solly and 5 pence. Royale? Total boss. The sun's up. My turn. Sikatron, their fellow Nighthawk, entered the room at 6. Klein quickly jotted down the night's events in the record book, then made his exit with Leonard and Royale. Exhausted, Klein was dragging his feet while Leonard, the sleepless poet, was fresh as a daisy. This sequence thing was seriously unfair. Klein was ready to crash at home when he spotted the captain. Morning, Captain, Klein greeted with a yawn. Dunn took off his hat, looking at him with those tired gray eyes. Morning, go get some rest. Anything happen last night? Klein gave him a quick rundown of the puppet incident and Leonard's deductions. Got it, Dunn said, heading to his office. I'll notify the Holy Cathedral. Klein left the building, breathing in the cool morning air, feeling a little more alive. Then it hit him like a ton of bricks. I forgot to tell the captain about the paper in the misfortune cloth puppet's hands. How did I forget that? It was like something was keeping me from spilling the beans. What's the deal with the Antigonus notebook? Is it linked to why I survived, became a seer? Klein stood there, torn between going home to sleep or heading back inside to report his latest realization. His thoughts raced as he tried to piece together the puzzle that had been haunting him since last night. How could I have forgotten? He wondered again, unnerved by how easily the detail about the misfortune cloth puppet's paper had slipped from his mind. The thought gnawed at him. Had something, or someone, been preventing him from sharing it? He quickly retraced the events of the night. The misfortune cloth puppet, known as 30625, wasn't supposed to have any lifelike characteristics. Yet, it had moved. Leonard's deduction seemed logical. The recent introduction of the Antigonus family's notebook might have influenced the puppet's actions. Klein replayed Leonard's reasoning in his head. There's no doubt about it, Klein muttered to himself. The problem had to lie with the notebook, not sealed artifact 2049. If it were 2049, similar incidents would have occurred elsewhere. The notebook was the only new factor. As this thought struck him, Klein's mind wandered back to the puppet and the paper it held in its hands. Why had the puppet acted last night and not earlier? It had been months since the notebook had been stored behind Chanis Gate. Was it because it was the first time I was on shift at Chanis Gate? He speculated. Did it use all its power just to show me that piece of paper? His chest tightened as a chilling suspicion took hold. What is the motive of the Antigonus family's notebook? Has it got to do with my survival despite making contact with it? And that I became a seer? Chapter 110, Confirmation. After some deep thinking, the kind that almost puts you to sleep, Klein decided it was time to head home and confirm something. If that creepy little misfortune cloth puppet wasn't intentionally flashing him that picture like, yo, check this out, then surely the captain and the crew would stumble on it during their follow-up. Whether Klein reported it or not wasn't going to change a thing. But if it was intentional, well, that was something worth stewing over, like a mystery wrapped in a puzzle, dipped in weird sauce. Klein hopped onto the trackless public carriage, public transport, keeping your sanity and your wallet light. By the time he made it back to Daffodil Street, his siblings, Benson and Melissa, were still knocked out, enjoying the beautiful glory of a Sunday morning. The living room? Dark and quiet, just like Klein's soul after a bad divination. Klein threw some tea leaves into hot water, gulped it down with some bread like it was the last snack of the century, then grabbed his coat, hat, and cane. Because even when you're an investigator, style matters. He tiptoed like he was a kid sneaking out past curfew, trying not to wake anyone up. Just as he hit the second floor, the bathroom door swung open, and there was Melissa, rubbing her eyes and looking like she was fresh out of a sleep coma. "You're home," she muttered, looking like she hadn't fully loaded into reality yet. Klein yawned so wide you'd think he was trying to swallow the universe. "Yeah, I need to crash. Don't wake me up till lunch, got it?" Melissa, still processing this interaction, managed a sleepy nod. Then, like someone hit her reboot button, she remembered something. "Oh, right. Benson and I are heading to St. Selena Cathedral for Mass this morning. Lunch might be fashionably late." Klein was like, "Great, more time to snore." He gave her a nod, smiling. No problem. He could sleep forever. Walking past Melissa, he made a beeline to his room, locked the door, and got ready for some mystical shenanigans. Time to get spooky. He took out his ritual dagger like it was just another Tuesday, set up a spirituality wall, then strutted around the room 4 steps counterclockwise, reciting his incantation like he was casting a spell in some fantasy RPG. The chaotic roars came, but Klein? Cool as a cucumber. He showed up above the gray fog, back in the illusionary world like it was his second home. Sitting at the head of the long bronze table, all alone, Klein took a minute to just vibe. Then, with a snap of mystical fingers, he conjured a piece of goatskin parchment and scribbled a divination incantation. "The picture that the misfortune cloth puppet showed me," he wrote. Klein had barely glanced at that mysterious drawing last night, his mind full of anxiety and possibly regret for not getting more sleep, but it was cool. As a seer, he had a superpower, being able to remember and reproduce anything he'd seen. Basically, he was like a walking Polaroid, and mysticism made sure his spiritual essence remembered everything. No stress. After finishing his arts and crafts, Klein leaned back, dove into cogitation, and slipped into dreamland. In the hazy, dreamlike world, Chanis Gate creaked open like a horror movie setting the scene. That creepy doll in the black regal gown poked its head through the door, like, "Hey, look at this," and whipped out the paper it was holding. Klein stared at the drawing on the paper, mysterious symbols all forming a vertical eye. Because why not add more creepy stuff to his day? When Klein snapped back to reality, oops, there goes gravity, he conjured the same drawing onto the brown parchment in front of him. The vertical eye stared back at him like it knew all his secrets. Sinister, mysterious, creepy. He added a note beneath the drawing. This is the key to the treasure that the antagonist family left behind. Well, that escalated quickly. He grabbed his trusty pendulum, never leave home without one, and dangled the topaz stone over the parchment. The thing swung in small clockwise circles, like it was nodding at him. Yep, that meant confirmation. All right then, Klein thought. So it is the key to the treasure. He tapped his fingers on the table like he was piecing together a puzzle. So, with Ray Bieber out of the picture and no Antigonus family members left, does that mean the notebook sees me as its heir? Like, congratulations, you've won a treasure and you didn't even know you were in the running. But wait, Klein wasn't buying it fully. How could the notebook be sure there are no more Antigonus family members? And besides, I don't even have a drop of their bloodline. Well, either way, no big deal. It's not like the captain and the team would be left out. Let's see what happens. Klein did a quick divination to track down the location of the Antigonus treasure. But of course, the universe wasn't going to hand him the map on a silver platter. He only got the same info. The treasure was tied to the Hornasis mountain range and the ancient nation of the Evernight. Classic. Back to reality. After wrapping up all the mystical business, Klein felt the faint fluctuations from that crimson star again, the one from earlier prayers. Oh boy, here we go again, he thought. Touching the star, Klein saw the young man in the tight black suit. This dude really liked his formal wear, praying again. And this time, Klein caught a sentence. Pray, save, father and mother. Oh damn, dude's speaking in Jotun. Klein shook his head. Man, that's ancient. Like, write your homework on a stone tablet, ancient. Still, Klein couldn't help but feel a little bad. He couldn't save anyone, even if he wanted to. Sorry, bro, I'm just here for the mystical vibes. Klein pulled back his spirituality, wrapped it around himself like a cozy blanket, and returned to his room. Sleep mode engaged. He slept until 12:30 when Melissa, like the relentless sibling she was, knocked on his door. Time to get up for lunch. Lunch and life talks. After stuffing his face with a surprisingly good meal, Klein noticed Melissa was dressed up like she was about to attend some fancy event. Got plans this afternoon? Klein asked. Benson, without even looking up from his grammar books, because clearly grammar is life, chimed in. Mrs. Shaw had invited Melissa to a lecture at the municipal hall. It's about family affairs and stuff. Melissa's trying to learn how to adult better. Melissa nodded. Yeah, I roped in Selena and Elizabeth to come with me. Klein grinned. Well, that's nice. Maybe the lecture will tell you that we need a maid or two around here. Melissa gave him the side eye but didn't say a word. Klein added quickly, I mean, we've got more important things to do than mop floors. She gave him a look, puckered her lips, and left for her lecture. Back to business. At 2 p.m., Klein was back at the Blackthorn Security Company. Both Roseanne and Dunn shot him a look like, weren't you supposed to be resting? Klein smiled. I was going to head to the Divination Club, but then I remembered last night's craziness. Figured I'd stop by. Any word from the Holy Cathedral? Dunn didn't say a word. He just gave Roseanne the silent, move along signal and headed for his office. Roseanne pulled a face at Dunn's back, muttering, Seriously, Captain? Klein fought the urge to laugh and followed Dunn inside. Once they were settled, Dunn said the Holy Cathedral confirmed it. The Antigonus notebook caused the disturbance. It's been reclassified as a Grade 1 sealed artifact, so you won't be getting any more peeks at it. Grade 1, huh? Well, that's a relief, Klein thought. I'll leave the dangerous stuff to the higher-ups. Dunn added, the Holy Cathedral also asked us to check for any other contamination behind Chanis Gate. Everything else was clean, except 3-TAD-0625. We've resealed it. Klein nodded, then left for the Divination Club to continue his journey of mystical enlightenment. Melissa's outing. At the municipal hall, Melissa, Selena, and Elizabeth were already seated near the door, like they were ready to bolt at any moment. If this lecture sucks, we're sneaking out, Selena suggested, eyes twinkling with mischief. Elizabeth was all for it. And then we're hitting Harrods for some shopping.